Welcome to the Low Carb Athlete Podcast, where we focus on discussing topics to help you burn fat, optimize health, and improve performance in life and sports. Transform the whole you from the inside out with the holistic method. Let's dive in. Here's your host, Debbie Potts.
Hey guys, it's Debbie, and have you used a CGM before? CGM is continuous glucose monitor, and there's different options out there. Ideally, you can get it from your doctor, but they seem to just want to wait until you're type 2 diabetic and not be preventative. I would like us to take ownership of our health and make choices now to prevent having high, low glucose readings and optimize your health from the inside out by testing and not guessing. And that includes a CGM that goes on for 14 days, and you can order one via NutriSense. And a CGM is giving you glucose updates with a small device in the back of your arm 24/7. Totally easy. I actually did a video on my YouTube channel, Low Carb Athlete, how to apply this CGM. First time, kind of scared, but it doesn't hurt. But it gives you real-time glucose readings. Glucose response to meals. You'll learn about what foods are reactive to you, and that could be a healthy food that you think is great, but it could raise your glucose. Simple things as stevia, for me, raise my glucose. Chewing gum, raise my glucose. Stress, when I'm driving a car and there's traffic, raises my glucose. Every stress response is a glucose response. So learn how to manage your stress. Learn how to pick right foods for you, unless you can, do other lab testing and figure out Vibrant Wellness food zoomers, but it's kind of expensive for people. So if you can wear a CGM, it's a great way to learn about stress, food, exercise, stacking movement with your nutrition. Figure out how to balance your blood sugar. So we want to learn more about how to exercise and eat or not eat. And morning cortisol, does it raise your glucose? If there's hidden stressors at nighttime, does your glucose go up higher while you're sleeping? So it gives us lots of clues that we can put in our investigation when we are working on your personalized fueling, training, and performance program to improve fat loss, performance, and longevity. So head to NutriSense website, nutrisense.io, how it works. You can learn more about your habits, your routines, your relationship to food, a little bit more. Great app to use, and it can sync on to different programs. So you can put it all together. So if you want to get started with your journey in NutriSense, I suggest this to all my clients. Use at least 30 days. So you can do a 30-day, 90-day, different programs, but you can pick which one you want. You get the sensor in the mail, put it on, lasts for 14 days, sync it to the app, and get your readings on there. And then if you're doing my VIP coaching program, I'm working with you to correlate this data together. So begin your health optimization journey with NutriSense, and you can save on your order with our code, as usual, Low Carb Athlete. So no carbs is not our goal, it's carb timing, and using NutriSense, you can help figure out your nutrient-dense whole food plan and when to adjust your macros based on your exercise intensity, duration, based on your life stressors, and learn more. So it's nice to have this data. So test and not guess with NutriSense. Let me know how you like it. Hey guys, it's Debbie Potts, and I have Sarah Ballantyne on the show today. She is the founder of Nutrivore.com and the New York Times best-selling author. Nutrivore, her new book, The Radical New Science for Getting the Nutrients You Need from the Food You Eat. Brilliant. Hello. That's what we all should be striving for. Hopefully, we are focusing on eating a nutrient-dense diet, but it's being able to get the nutrients from the food we eat is a big part of nutrition, digestion, absorption, gut health. So Dr. Sarah and I talk about all sorts of things, including, of course, her new book. She created educational resources to help people improve their day-to-day diet and lifestyle choices, empowered and informed by the most current evidence-based scientific research. With her new book and program, Nutrivore, Dr. Sarah has created a positive and inclusive approach to dietary guidance based on science and void of dogma, using the nutrient density and sufficiency as its basic principles. Nourishment and not judgment. So I absolutely loved our conversation, and hopefully you did too. And we'll have her back on the show to dive in some other topics we started to get little tangent on as gut health and microbiome. So we will talk about diet myths and nutrient-focused lifestyle, how we can tailor our nutrition to our needs, and really looking at this concept. I just love simple eating plans. And what I love to talk about is what to eat. I don't like saying keto, carnivore, low carb, paleo. Just eat real food, nutrient dense food that balances your blood sugar. And we want to focus on nutrient density. That's what Dr. Sarah Ballantyne's talking about in this new book. So the book comes out as we speak, May 14th, and I'll put the link in the show notes. But I think you will definitely enjoy this episode. So who is Dr. Sarah? I've been following her for a long time, but if you don't know who she is amazing on educating us on how to be our best self with what we're eating and more. So she creates so much educational resources on her social media and her podcast interviews I've heard and books, but she began her career as a science communicator and health educator when she launched her original website way back in 2011. Since then, Dr. Sarah has continued to follow the science, diving deep into immune health, metabolic health, the gut microbiome, which we talked about a little bit, and nutritional sciences, and the compelling evidence for health at any size, while observing the harm of healthism, diet culture, dogmatic misinformation, and the marketing we have around us. So with her new book, Nutrivore, Dr. Sarah has created a positive and inclusive approach to dietary guidance based in science and using nutrient density and sufficiency as its basic principles. Nourishment, not judgment, is what I really love. And she is pretty brilliant. So enjoy the show. Go find her book, Nutrivore, and let me know what you think and what questions you have so we can get her back on the show. All right. Hope you like it. I just wanted to add a little bit more information about Dr. Sarah's book because I think this will help you with our conversation today on Nutrivore. Her book in Nutrivore is the radical new science of getting nutrients you need from the food you eat. Dr. Sarah Ballantyne builds a case for the approach to dietary guidelines by examining the psychology of restrictive diets. Traditional dieting poses risks such as food obsession, cravings, emotional eating, disordered eating, eating disorders, and weight regain, cycling as yo-yo dieting that many of us know about. One study showed that 35% of normal, quote unquote, whatever normal is, normal dieters progress to pathological dieting. That's 20 to 25% of those individuals developing eating disorders. So I just wanted to share this because I think you need to understand how Nutrivore is different. It's a different approach. So what I love is on Nutrivore, there are no foods you have to cut out. There are no, quote, good foods or bad foods. Instead, Dr. Sarah emphasizes on nutrient density. The emphasis is placed on the overall quality of the whole diet. She says we focus on eating more of those foods that supply us with ample nutrition that are known to improve our health. So by doing so, Her approach in Nutrivore supports healthy relationship with food, putting an end to restrictive dieting leading to disordered eating. And I love this because I really have found a dislike in the word dieting. What diet are you on? It drives me nuts. It's not a diet. It's eating to fuel our body and give it the nutrients it needs to do what we ask of it, especially as athletes and especially as we age and want to improve our future selves and how we show up to life when we're 70, 80, 90 years old. We need to fuel and train and perform our best so we can be our optimal self when we're older, our future self. So she also talks about instead of your health being something to be sacrificed for the sake of a diet, Nutrivore is all about supplying your body with the nutrients it needs to support health and to reduce risk of disease, as I was just talking about. Nutrivore is a balanced approach that fosters sustainability, a way of eating for lifelong health that additionally mends our relationship with our own bodies. And I know, being in health, fitness, nutrition coaching for almost 30 years, because I'm getting older, I find that our relationship with food needs to be addressed. I work with clients and talk about what we're eating, what they are eating, but how they're eating. Why are they eating that food? How does that food make them feel? When are you eating? What does the food environment look like? So where are you eating? So there's a lot more to figuring out what to eat, looking at macronutrient, but nutrient density, but also our relationship with food. So Nutrivore promotes a holistic, lifelong approach to health, which is what I am so passionate about right now. Nutrivore emphasizes that the individual food choices do not singularly define the success or the failure of one's diet or overall well-being. You can absolutely meet your body's nutritional needs from the foods you eat, while choosing some foods that are not particularly nutrient dense, but are just plain tasty. It's okay if some of our food choices are centered around joy rather than nutrient density. One food will not make or break your diet, nor make or break your health, she says. So Dr. Sarah's new book is a book you must get and read and enjoy. It's fascinating, fun to read, something I think your whole family could benefit from. I know I coach a lot of families, the parents and the kids, and everyone's getting older and really working with everyone individually, but working on our relationship with food and how to choose the best foods for our own bodies. You are unique. What I eat, what I need is sometimes different than what you need. So we don't have this one size fits all approach. We do have our nutrient dense foods that we need, the nutrition we need, the macro and micronutrients. But eating nutrient dense foods that are best for your body, but proper digestion and breakdown, and tying that into the microbiome health that we've been talking a lot about lately with our other doctor expert co-hosts, that we really want to look at gut health and tying that into testing and not guessing what is actually going on under your hood is an investment. Our insurance doesn't cover a microbiome test. It doesn't cover testing your GI stool test to find out, do you have diverse bacteria? Do you have bacteria overgrowth of opportunistic bacteria? Do you have pathogens, yeast overgrowth? What is your digestion looking like? Do you have malabsorption? Are you not breaking down your proteins, your fats? How are your short-chain fatty acids? So we want to look all that.
Also, look at my interview or listen to the interview with Agnes from Food Marvel, testing if you use small bacteria overgrowth with the breath test. Simple things you can do is like a lumen test to find out, are you burning fat or carbohydrates? The Food Marvel test we talked about in another episode coming up talks breath test to find out, do you have excess hydrogen or methane gas? So we really want to focus on what you're eating, nutrient-dense foods that balance your blood sugar, but making sure we have a healthy microbiome, because as we've heard, research from different experts, that all disease probably begins in a leaky gut. Not just your gut, but when your gut is leaking, we have increased chronic inflammation. So tie in all these recent episodes on nutrition and gut health and inflammation and superfoods to help your gut. So hopefully you're learning all this, but enjoy the episode with Dr. Sarah Ballantyne. Make sure you get her book, Nutrivore, so you're not missing out on this information to help you create a nice relationship with food to feed your body what it needs. Thanks for listening. All right, now finally, Dr. Sarah.
Get ready to accept the pop-up. There we go.
Hey, it's Debbie Potts, and I am welcoming Dr. Sarah Ballantyne on the show. I'm a big fan of all your work you've done over the years, and we have something new to talk about, Nutrivore. So thanks for your time today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
So what's your why? Tell us, what keeps driving you to do more and give so much to our community?
So when I was 4 years old, and a grown-up would ask me, what do you want to do? What do you want to be when you grow up? I used to say, I want to do something important that helps people. I think that is so deep into the core of who I am, that I think my entire life has been building up the personal life experience, the health struggles, the experience of having changes to diet and lifestyle have such a profound impact on my day-to-day well-being, but also my innate science nerdiness, and how I've always been drawn to medical research. I have a PhD in medical biophysics. I think every part of who I am and every experience I've had in my life has been building to fulfilling that piece of who I am at my core, someone who cares deeply about fixing the challenges we have in terms of the rise of chronic illness, of diet preventable illness in Western countries, in the entire world. It's who I am.
Mm-hmm. Love that. I think that's what everyone that's in their space, we have a story and we have a purpose from that history, and we are following our purpose and having a mission to make a difference in the world. And you've definitely put your time in, and I want to dive into what is Nutrivore, because I think it's so essential. As I'll just add in, I know it's so confusing out there for people who are in the health and wellness space of paleo to carnivore to keto before that, and then now it's ketovore, and I just keep saying nutrient density. So share with us what Nutrivore is all about.
So I think of Nutrivore as a dietary philosophy rather than a diet, because as you just alluded to, diets they're trendy, right? They come and go. And when you're in that diet world, you tend to hop from diet to diet to diet, and you tend to hop from restriction to restriction to restriction. So for me, Nutrivore is a way of thinking about food that for some people can help them get more out of their diet if they found something that really works for them. And for someone like me, who really got into a lot of trouble with restrictive dieting in terms of my own health, it is my path out. It is my stepping stone out of diet culture. So Nutrivore is just very simply the goal of getting all of the nutrients our bodies need from the foods we eat. That's all it is. It is simply, my body has requirements for vitamins and minerals and amino acids and protein and fiber. How do I understand food so that I can choose those foods so that all of the nutrients they contain add up throughout the day to actually meet what my body needs from food? And how can I understand food in a way that is not tied to a specific diet so that I can apply this base knowledge to whatever else other priorities I have, right? Whatever else I know works for me. Maybe I need to avoid certain foods for medical reasons. Maybe I have certain health goals that would help focus my food decisions in a certain way. Nutrivore is that base nutritional sciences knowledge that ideally we'd all have. Ideally, we would know kind of the same amount about nutrition when we graduate high school that we do about like math and grammar, but we just don't. So Nutrivore is also like just that general knowledge base that we can use to help identify, hey, here's this nutrient I know I'm not getting enough of. Here's this food that has it, that I like, that I have access to, that I can afford. And it helps us identify those foods to add to our diets so that we're actually meeting our nutritional needs. So it's a dietary philosophy, along with being just like a nutritional sciences knowledge base for the average person.
Mm-hmm. So good. Where do you think we went wrong in all these different diets and people just doing, as I said, one diet to another, not really learning more?
So I think I could probably rattle on for about 3 or 4 hours. I have a lot of thoughts. For 70 years, we have described diets based on what you don't eat, not based on what you do eat. So it started with low fat, right, in the 70s and 80s. It became low carb in the 90s and 2000s. Every popular diet is defined by a list of foods that you avoid and you restrict. And what happens when you think of a diet in terms of the things you're cutting out, first of all, there's this whole psychology around food restriction that increases food obsession and cravings, food fixation. It leads to disinhibition, where you like break your rule and then the snowball starts and you like fall off the proverbial wagon and all of your health behaviors unravel. So restricting food psychology wise like drives the diet yo-yo. But there's this whole other piece of the psychology of that, which is I went on this diet where I cut out all these things and this great thing happened. I lost weight, or I had more energy. My headaches went away. My skin cleared up. Whatever the thing is that we initially experienced, we credit to what we cut out, not to the things that we were eating instead, which is actually like the mechanism behind how we experienced that health thing. So when we hit a wall, because we inevitably do, right? I lost 10 pounds, but I want to lose 10 more. Or my energy was good, but like I'm still kind of having this slump in the afternoon, right? Whatever I started, I was lifting more at the gym, but now I've plateaued again, right? We're always going to hit, because that's our biology adapts. We're always going to hit the limits of what that diet can do for us. And those limits often driven by not supplying our bodies with all of the nutrients our bodies need. When we hit that wall and we were thinking of things in terms of that worked because I cut out all these things, the very natural next step is to go, I got to cut out more. Oh, I got to do the next diet that cuts out even more things, that's even more restrictive. Maybe I need to combine this diet with this diet and cut out all of these different foods. And what it's doing is there's like that old Homer Simpson's episode where the guy's digging a hole and he's like, no, dig up, stupid, right? Like it's this idea that like we're taking a situation of like the standard American diet does not meet our nutritional needs. It's so far short. But most all fad diets also have nutrients that are much harder to get within that dietary structure. The more things you cut out, the more likely it is you are to have nutrient shortfalls. And so we're actually like throwing kerosene onto the fire of like not meeting our nutritional needs. And those dietary shortfalls get us into health trouble. And then we think the fix to that is cut out more food sources of nutrients. And so this is like another key driver of the yo-yo, is that because the vast majority of us aren't thinking about foods in terms of vitamins and minerals, like essential nutrients. We're thinking of them in terms of macronutrients, or in terms of food groups, in terms of toxins we need to avoid, because we're thinking of it in terms of this, like this whole separate, right? This whole separate, it's either energy or it's restriction. We're missing out on the thing that food is supposed to give us, which is the chemicals, the raw materials for all of the chemical reactions of life. It's all of the things that our bodies need to do all of the things that our bodies do. And so the more restrictive we get, the less in line we are with that overall nutritional philosophy. And we're not, like, we need just a complete mindset shift to be able to go, oh, I need to add food back in rather than go to the next restriction, which is like another thing that Nutrivore is here to address.
Mm-hmm. I think it's important as my audience is typically, we're aging over 40, over 50 now for me. And I was competitive endurance athlete when I was doing all the right things that I thought was good, doing really low carb, being strict, kind of in that beginning keto part of the world, metabolic efficiency, burning lots of fat. And this was 2012, 2013, I got my adrenal exhaustion, whatever burnout breakdown you want to say it's from, but I would say too much of everything. And I think athletes try to improve performance and they want to get lean and strong, more powerful. So they cut nutrition and exercise more. And even people just generally trying to lose weight. Our old school method is lose weight. I need to exercise more. I need to eat less. And then fasting came a trend over the years. And then we were all, oh, fasting, I need intermittent fasting. I need OMAD, but that wasn't designed for the fit and active individual or the aging female athlete, or not even aging, but all ages. So what have you found for those that are fit and active, how we can go wrong trying to skip out on nutrition, and how it's probably pretty important for our performance, recovery, repair, and longevity to focus on what we are eating?
Yeah, I mean, I think you alluded to a bigger problem that diet culture teaches us. Whether your goal is, I mean, diet culture to me, it's like the goals are typically either losing weight or performance, or like a body composition goal, right? Like I want my beach bod. And we have just over decades and decades and decades to the point where we're like, we don't really intuitively know what a balanced diet or a nutritious diet actually even looks like anymore. We have viewed health as a thing to sacrifice for those other goals. Studies show that like losing weight doesn't automatically make you healthier, right? It's the healthy habits that you adopt along the way that do. And most weight loss diets don't actually encourage healthy habit formation. And so there are studies where groups of people are actually getting less healthy through weight loss. They're increasing their risk of type 2 diabetes or cardiovascular disease or cancer over the next 10 or 20 years. And that's not a trade that I think we go into, like, there's not a disclosure statement, right? There's not a, here's the trade you're making. Like, I feel like we don't know that's the contract we're signing. We equate athletic performance with health, or we equate being thin with health, but they actually mean different things. We can absolutely, I mean, we certainly can have them together, and that is my goal. And I'm sure everyone listening, they're like, no, I want both. Like I want to run my sub 2 hour marathon, and I want to, be healthy and not have all of those long-term health problems. But the challenge is when you think of food choice with this one simplistic goal in mind that isn't long-term health outcomes, if we're not thinking about long-term health outcomes and thinking about the nutrients that our bodies need, it's really, really easy to end up falling short of nutrients. There was, I think it was 2006, So a small study, they looked at 70 detailed food logs from 20 individuals, but 14 of whom were athletes. And they analyzed 17 different essential nutrients. So they were like, how are these food logs, hitting, the dietary reference levels for these particular individuals, for these vitamins, for these minerals. And every single food log, all 70 of them, were short of anywhere between 3 and all 17 nutrients that they were looking at. And I think, the part of this is our food supply. The bigger part of it is that we just don't have the knowledge base. We just don't have that sense of, okay, well, I need to eat my leafy greens for my vitamin K. I need to eat my seafood for my omega-3 fatty acids. Like that type of base knowledge is just missing. So it's really easy to go, okay, I need to eat this many grams of protein and miss all of the, think about, okay, well, I'm going to do that by, let's say, relying on protein powders, which are refined. They don't have vitamins and minerals in them the way the food does. Not that they're bad, but if that's the dominant source of protein, then we're missing out on those nutrients. So how can I use the protein powder to still get my protein intake, but make sure I'm getting enough of those whole food sources of protein to also get the nutrients that are essential for my metabolism, for my neurological health, for my immune health, for my cardiovascular system, nutrients important for even like musculoskeletal health, right? That's very supportive of performance and also like injury avoidance. How can I choose foods with these two goals in mind? I'm going to support my fitness goals or my weight loss goals, but I'm also going to support every biological system in my body and what it needs to work as efficiently as possible for as long as possible.
Mm-hmm. So the person that is fit and active, the athlete that's maybe going, like, I'll go to the gym in the morning and then I'm doing master swim at lunchtime. Maybe someone's going for a run or a bike ride, whatever. They're working out more than one time a day, usually. Yeah. So their nutrient requirements are going to be way higher. Well, even the standards out there, recommendations are for people besides, don't eat less than this or you're going to die. So that
that's right.
Recommendations are high into the range, even above that for some things. So what do you say for athletes that are fit and active? How much more should we look at? Should we do testing? Let's kind of go into what the active person needs.
I mean, the challenge is it's not really well defined, right? So we have recommended dietary intake levels for different age, sex, and like life stage categories. By life stage, I mean pregnant and lactating. Other than that, we just have age and biological sex as our like categories. And that is set at a level that would meet the needs. Most nutrients are set at the level where that would meet the needs of 97.5% of the population. The remaining 2.5%, which I would say athletes are generally going to qualify as, need more.
Yeah.
How much more is almost never defined. We really don't have good scientific studies to say, okay, so you're doing 3 hours of training a day for all your B vitamins, get 20% more. For your, minerals, for calcium, magnesium, let's say your electrolytes, you need 30% more. We don't have, I'm just pulling those numbers out. Those numbers are not I'm just making that up.
Yeah.
We don't know. We don't have that. So I think, what I would recommend, based on the science that we have, here's the thing is that still most people are not hitting those recommended dietary intake levels. So let's aim for that as a minimum. Let's also keep in mind that a lot of nutrients have a tolerable upper limit, which is basically the most amount to eat every single day for our entire lives that is considered perfectly safe. And that has to do with some nutrients can build up in our bodies. We don't have really great ways of getting rid of extra, right? Like iron's a really good example of this. You can have iron overload. It's called hemochromatosis. So if you're consuming a lot of iron, there's a gene that makes you store iron extra too. So like there's a hereditary component here. But if you're consuming like way too many iron-rich foods, you can hit what's called chronic toxicity level. So it's just built up too much in your body that you're actually having hemochromatosis. You're having these symptoms of iron toxicity. And there's a lot of nutrients that have a tolerable upper limit. So just being aware, we don't want to go above the tolerable upper limit for things like vitamin A or vitamin D, whatever, like minerals that we can't get rid of the extra. So like iron, we have a hard time getting rid of the extra, but potassium, no problem. You take extra potassium, your kidneys, as long as your kidneys are working, they just go, too much. We don't need all this. Off you go, and down, it flushes down the toilet. So being aware that there's this range between the daily value and the tolerable upper limit, and we want to be somewhere in that range every single day, ideally. Mm-hmm. And I think, like, yes, probably for B vitamins, we want to be higher. Well, most B vitamins don't actually have a tolerable upper limit, but because they're so important for producing adenosine triphosphate, which is like the energy molecule that all of our cells use. ATP. Yeah. So like B vitamins, so important, right? Just for metabolism. Mm-hmm. So probably, for using a lot of energy in our muscles, like makes sense to me that B vitamins would be something we need more of. Makes sense to me that vitamin C would be something we need more of, given its role in producing collagen, which is important connective tissue in muscles, and it's the protein scaffold of bones. It makes sense to me that we would probably increase electrolyte needs because we're going to lose some through sweat. But how much? I can't say. The science just does not give us answers yet. No. And when we do have answers, I will let everyone know. But right now, like, just think of the daily value, because most people still aren't even hitting that level, and think of it as a minimum.
Well, I think, yes, minimum and N equals 1, we're all unique individuals, and you can't, even if they did come out with scientific-based guidelines, I think it's just total estimate.
It still represents an average, right? Yeah. It's still an average, and we're not all well represented by the average.
Yeah. And then men versus women, and then women, as you said, different stages of our life, it gets complicated. So with that, I would say you can't out supplement poor lifestyle habits. You can't out exercise poor nutrition habits.
I agree.
But nutrient density is very confusing, especially I talked to Dr. Minkoff about essential amino acids and the protein you're talking about in our food, of whey protein versus eggs versus, it's not this equals that. It's so much more complicated. And listening to Dr. Gabrielle Lyon to get the essential amino acid profile with the 3 grams of leucine in that amino acid to create the muscle protein synthesis. So I've been totally geeking out and going down these rabbit holes and looking at plant versus animal based. It's like how to get all that.
Right. Can I mix in a little pea protein with my whey protein to get some more leucine? Yeah.
It's confusing for people, and even myself. And you're just trying to look at, okay, how do I figure out what to eat? And then I got into phytates, lectins, oxalates. It's like, what's there left to eat? That's why people get confused, I think. So question would be, you have the book Nutrivore and you have a scoring system. Tell us a little bit about that. Like, how do we choose what to eat? What's best for me as I age?
So the Nutrivore score, which is a great name because it rhymes, anything alliterative or punny or rhyming, it just tickles my brain in a great way. Is a nutrient profiling method. So it's a way of quantifying nutrient density. I did not, when I was in the early development phases of sort of building Nutrivore, I had no intention of developing my own nutrient profiling method. I was going to go through the scientific literature and go, who's got the best way of calculating nutrient density? I'm going to use that. And then I discovered that none of the ways were very good. I spent 3 months reading every single nutrient profiling paper, or just about everyone that was out there at the time, and kept hitting what seemed like real logical left turns in that field. And I think the entire field as a whole has a really pretty major handicap, which is dietary guidelines. So the field of nutrient profiling right now, their mission is to create a nutrient profiling method, so a way of quantifying nutrient density, which means nutrients per calorie. So the math that can calculate nutrients per calorie, and doing that in a way that supports dietary guidelines. So whatever the national guidelines are. So in the US, it's the US Dietary Guidelines for Americans. So the the entire field is looking at these guidelines and trying to like figure out what math best aligns with it. So they're kind of retrofitting a algorithm, retrofitting a nutrient density score to guidelines that already exist. Guidelines which have been criticized by many people over the recent decades for not being super represented by the science, so taking fairly weak science as evidence. I look at this and go, it makes so much more sense to just figure out the nutrient density of foods, to have a way of quantifying it, to be able to have a number that gives us the nutritive value of a food, and then use that to inform the next update, right? The USDA Dietary Guidelines for Americans updates every 5 years. We could develop a nutrient density score and then go, oh, look, here's these foods that are so, so nutrient dense. Let's tweak the guidelines to represent that. That is not where this field of science is as a whole. So it's one of the times where being outside of the academic community is an advantage, while having an academic background to rely on. So I created the Nutrivore score to be objective and to just tell me the nutrient density of foods, and not try to like, what's happening right now is people are like, okay, which nutrients do I put in my calculation so that it fits the dietary guidelines? Oh, look, it fits better with 9 nutrients into my calculation instead of 15. So I'm going to use 9. That makes no sense. So the Nutrivore score calculation uses 33 nutrients, basically every single nutrient that I have complete enough data to make sense, even using it in the calculation. And it's one way to look at food. I would never say only choose food based on the Nutrivore score. But I think what's so fascinating about this measurement of nutrient density, it's a calculation. It is like a quantification of nutrients per calorie of a food, is the number of foods that have reputations for being empty calories, for being nutritionally pointless, that get like a redemption arc because of this calculation. That to me is my favorite. Yeah, there's some foods that are disappointing, that have lower scores than I was expecting. That has happened as well. But the foods that are just like, wow, like iceberg lettuce, which we think of as being the nutritional equivalent of cardboard, or we think of as being like crunchy water and just being like the most pointless vegetable, is more nutrient dense than celery or cucumber or artichoke.
Oh, really?
And
that's a shock.
And it only that's a small amount, and doesn't mean that, I'm not saying that celery or cucumber or artichoke are bad. I'm just saying that iceberg lettuce is nutritively valuable. Other lettuces, if you like other lettuces, they're typically like 3 times more nutrient dense. They have more, sure, but so many people only like iceberg lettuce. And I think that to me is the most powerful way to use the Nutrivore score, is to feel good about those food choices that are more accessible to us, in terms of like, I can actually find that at my grocery store. Iceberg lettuce is much more readily available, especially at small stores. That's more affordable. It tends to be the cheapest lettuce in the store. And that is accessible in terms of the flavor profile. It's the one that I like. It's the one I'm familiar with. I enjoy the crunch. It also keeps better. It keeps longer in the fridge than most other lettuce types, right? So I love that the Nutrivore score gives us this way of valuing foods for the nutrients they contain, and especially those foods that have been just kind of left behind. They've been demonized. They have an unearned reputation for not being good. And meanwhile, look at iceberg lettuce and its amazing Nutrivore score.
So how do you look at macronutrients? A lot of people were talking, it was low carb and keto, getting the high fat. Now we're focusing on make sure you get those protein macros in each meal and hit at least 100 grams a day. How do you create meals with that, like looking at the Nutrivore score and exercise? We talk about strategic carbohydrate timing, if it's more of a high intensity workout. How do we put this all together?
So I feel like there's like 3 different parts to this question. So first, just talking about like macronutrients more broadly. The Nutrivore is a philosophy. So if you have protein goals, if you have carbohydrate timing very specifically, you want a carb load before, a run or a race, right? Like, Nutrivore doesn't take away from that. It is an emphasis to layer on top of that.
Yeah.
But when we're talking about general health and we're talking about the population at large, the sort of default on Nutrivore is balanced macronutrients. So it's macronutrients within the accepted macronutrient distribution ranges, which are set by the Institute of Medicine, based on the scientific literature as a whole, showing that that's like the happy medium range for protein, carbohydrates, and fat that reduces risk of bad health things happening, and also makes it easiest to get micronutrients. So that is already like incorporated into those macronutrient distribution ranges. So it's like 20 to 35% calories from protein or from fat, 15 to 30% from protein, 45 to 65% from carbohydrate. Also getting 14 grams per 1,000 calories of fiber, and limiting saturated fat to 10% of calories, limiting added sugar to 10% of calories. So look at all of that's kind of built in there. So that's kind of the default starting place on Nutrivore. But the great thing about Nutrivore is that you can still like put that emphasis on top of other priorities. So for example, I power lift. So I have like massive protein goals every single day. And so for me to hit my protein goals, I need to be really conscientious about getting, 30 to 40 grams of protein with each of 3 meals a day. If I have a snack, it's got to include at least 10 or 15 grams of protein. Otherwise, my snack is not helping to serve my protein goals. And so I think that, for me, Nutrivore is about understanding not just the protein in the food, but the other nutrients that it contains. So how do we pull it all together? I have a tool called the Nutrivore Meal Map, which is like a basic way to create a balanced plate that then you could tinker with, right? So I say divide your plate into 4. So a quarter of your plate is a starchy food. You would maybe shrink that quarter if you don't want as much carbohydrates at that meal, for example. A quarter of your plate is a protein food. You might increase that a little bit if you're, trying to get an extra 10, 15 grams of protein with that meal, right? And then half of your plate is fruits and vegetables. Maybe it's more non-starchy vegetables, again, if you're watching the carbohydrate intake. But maybe if you're carb loading, that starchy quarter of your plate's a little bit bigger, and maybe you've got some fruit in that fruit and vegetable half of your plate. So it is roughly 4 quarters. Lots of ways that we can, finagle those in order to fit our specific macronutrient needs. And then like mostly whole foods and as many different foods as possible. And when you just kind of take that emphasis, you don't actually need to think about the Nutrivore score very much. You can then, now let's up the ante. Let's make this even more nutritious. Let's get even more nutrients in this meal. Now we can start looking at, okay, let's look at that starchy quarter of our plate and think about what foods could go on there. Well, I could put a dinner roll on there. It's got a Nutrivore score of like 130, something fairly underwhelming. Or I could put a baked potato there. Now we're talking like Nutrivore score 270-ish. Or I could put a baked sweet potato there. Nutrivore score of 370-ish. Or I could put baked butternut squash there. Nutrivore score of 718, if I remember correctly. So the Nutrivore score, I think, is best used for identifying swaps that help increase, right? Like the swaps for foods that play the same role in our meal. Right. So I'm not going to look at swapping out that dinner roll with spinach, right? Like it's not playing the same role in my meal. I'm looking at, this is a starchy carbohydrate food. What are my other starchy carbohydrate options that can give me more nutrition? Maybe I'm swapping that out for a lentil salad, right? And that's going to be a Nutrivore score of 400 some odd. So it allows me to identify the more nutrient-dense options that have the same, like play the same role in my overall diet. I can do the same thing with protein foods. I can do the same things with non-starchy vegetables. And maybe I even only compare certain like vegetable families, right? So the Nutrivore score helps us do that. And then it also identifies like, what are the foods I can add? So I've got my base meal here. I'm going to eat my brown rice, chicken breast, and broccoli. What can I add to this that's going to get me more nutrition? Seasoning is, and going to add flavor. Seasoning's going to be a big one here, right? Adding, maybe swapping out or adding a different kind of vegetable, add some mushrooms, add something that's even more nutrient dense than broccoli. So the Nutrivore score can also help us up the ante of our meals, either by swapping out one thing for something similar that's more nutrient dense, or by going, what can I add to this meal? What nutrient am I not getting in this meal that I can go identify the food that will help get me that nutrient and up the nutrient intake from this meal, and also make it less boring.
Great. So we've been talking a lot lately about chronic inflammation, leaky gut, metabolic and endotoxins, LPS, high levels in the gut. How can you correlate anything with the Nutrivore scores from like polyphenols and fermented foods? And have you seen any patterns of foods that rate higher that are actually beneficial for the gut?
Certainly
Question,
yes.
Sorry.
Yes. No, certainly yes.
About that.
So let me take a tangent away from the Nutrivore score in answering this question. So our gut microbiome, so the community of bacteria that live in our digestive tract, help to control our immune system. I mean, they produce neurotransmitters that cross the blood-brain barrier. I mean, they're amazing for us. They also control the permeability of the intestinal barrier. So they are actually directly controlling how much lipopolysaccharide is getting into our bloodstream, the balance of gram-positive versus gram-negative, right? So we only have lipopolysaccharide in the bacterial membrane of gram-negative bacteria. So the balance between gram-positive and gram-negative in our guts is a major role here. So having a healthy community of gut bacteria in our digestive tracts is one of the most fundamental things we can do for our health. So things that they like, that we can do for them. Well, first of all, they like it when we're active. They like it when we get enough sleep. They like it when we don't have too much stress. So they're actually really sensitive to our hormone environment, and they are sensitive to our nutrient status. So for example, they like it when our vitamin D levels are in normal range. That actually helps to support a more diverse gut microbiome, as well as feeds the growth of really important probiotic sort of keystone species that are really important for our overall health. They obviously like fiber. I feel like that's the thing that everybody knows, but it's not just about how much fiber we're getting. It's about diversity of fiber types. So we have certain strains of bacteria in our guts who, they don't care. They don't care what we're doing. They're going to be there no matter what. They're just resilient, and they're going to grow no matter what we feed them, no matter what we do with our bodies. There's other species, and this happens to be a lot of like the most beneficial species of bacteria and archaea as well that we could have in our guts, that they're picky eaters. They are only going to hang out if we feed them their favorite food. And this is true for a lot of lactobacillus species. It's true for a lot of bifidobacterium species. It's true for Akkermansia muciphylla. It's true for Faecalibacterium protsnitzi, like some of the most beneficial, desirable species. They are picky. They want everything to be just right. And the way that we get everything just right is by feeding our bacteria whole food sources of fiber. So vegetables, fruit, legumes, whole grains, nuts and seeds. And but like when we do that, like foods have many different types of fiber in them. So now it's not just this one picky eat over here, but it's this picky eat over here and this picky eat over here. So we're actually feeding all the picky eaters their favorite food. So it's one of the reasons why a plant-forward diet, by eating lots of fruits and vegetables, especially because of their fiber types and their phytonutrients, their polyphenols, for example, is so beneficial for our gut bacteria. But here's the other thing. We also have bacteria that eat protein. And the protein that they like, besides us, because they do actually eat our gut lining, is fish. Fish protein best supports our gut microbiomes. They're also sensitive to the fats we eat. And their favorite fat is long-chain omega-3s in fish and olive oil. Those are their favorite fats. And so like these are also foods that are super nutritious for us. One of the ways they're probably benefiting our overall health is through supporting the health of a gut microbiome. And our gut bacteria, as like a last tie into Nutrivore, there's certain nutrients they can make, right? Like actually like half of our vitamin B6 is made by our gut bacteria, not what we get from food. Our gut bacteria are just, they're so awesome for us in so many different ways. But there's nutrients they can't make, right? They can't make minerals. Minerals are elements of the periodic table. They can't make those. So there's certain nutrients that if we need to make sure we're getting enough minerals, those fat soluble vitamins that they're not very good at making, vitamin A, D, E, and K. They can make K2, but they can't make K1. Those are the nutrients that when we're getting more of those, that also helps to support a healthy gut microbiome. So there is 100% a link between our gut bacteria and the foods we're eating. We can see all of those important lifelong eating patterns reflected in the composition of the gut microbiome and metabolic activity of the gut microbiome. So eating lots of fruits and vegetables, eating a wide diversity of foods, eating mostly whole foods. But we're not at a point where we can say these high Nutrivore score foods are like feeding these bacteria. And I don't think, because we're measuring things in such different ways, I don't think we would ever be able to draw a straight line like that, but we can certainly say Nutrivore eating patterns are supportive of the gut microbiome.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was just a thought because I was thinking, well, I know omega-3 fatty acids and green tea and olive oil and how those rank in the scoring system in the book, just foods that are just fermented foods that are really amazing for your gut.
And and it's in part because our gut bacteria want nutrients, and those foods have nutrients.
So I was thinking that is when gut bacteria, their byproducts, they make vitamins. Is it their poop? They're pooping out, and that's
yes, it is.
Like, are they really? No one ever says that, but
I say it all the time. I'm like, so postbiotics are bacteria poop. Yeah. Postbiotics is definitely a more accessible term. I think people would far prefer to think of it as postbiotics or metabolic byproducts than bacteria poop. But yeah, so like the main postbiotic that our gut bacteria make that we know exactly how it benefits our health are short chain fatty acids. So acetate, butyrate, and propionate. And this is absorbed into our bloodstream. It can be used directly as fuel by many of our cells, and especially our colonic cells are very, very healthy and happy when they've got lots of short chain fatty acids. And that is the result of bacterial fermentation of typically fiber types like resistant starch, like inulin fiber. And so, so they're eating the foods that we eat that we haven't absorbed into our bodies yet, right? So the stuff that like we're terrible at digesting fiber, right? We can only break apart like 16 or 18 different ways that carbohydrates bond together. And our gut bacteria can break apart like 1,500 different ways that carbohydrates can bind together. So that's why we don't get any energy from fiber, but they do. So they have different enzymes that can help break apart those molecular bonds between the carbohydrates and fiber. And then they eat basically, right? They're eating a sugar molecule and pooping out a short chain fatty acid, which is what is absorbed into our body and does the cool thing that our body needs. Yeah.
I was studying because I do lab testing as an FDN practitioner in nutritional therapy. So I'm always working on, what you eat, when, why, how, but then also testing and not guessing what's going on under the hood because you just don't know what you don't know. The last week I was doing lab test assessments all week long and diving in deep rabbit holes of certain markers, but the short chain fatty acids and butyrate and acetate, the different markers and how, why, all about short chain fatty acids. And it's so freaking fascinating when you dive into what the microbiome and what the body does for us.
So I think you've accidentally hit on the fact that I'm a huge gut microbiome nerd. I'm not sure if you knew that ahead of time.
Yes.
So there's a thing called bacterial cross feeding. So I don't know if you know what this is, but it's basically, so we've kind of talked about how some bacteria, we've got some picky eaters that have a favorite food. There's some bacteria whose favorite food is nothing we can give them. We cannot give them their favorite food. Their favorite food is another bacteria's poop. And so it's one of the reasons why microbial diversity is such an important hallmark of a healthy gut microbiome, because then you're not just increasing the number of different types of bacteria, you're increasing the number of different poops they make. So it's more different types of compounds that can benefit us, but you're also getting those relationships between their populations. So you've got different types of bacteria. So like Methanobrevibacter smithii is one of these ones.
You can say the words. I never can say them. Good job.
So here's the thing. I have no idea if I'm saying them right. I'm just saying them confidently. So I'm sure there's somebody out there going, that's not how that's said. So it's all just the confidence. But that is one that really like tends to grow with like bifidobacterium poop. And when you have Methanobrevibacter smithii, you also have less smelly flatulence because they eat methane. So, so like you have all of these different like relationships between bacteria, and it's again one of the reasons why a whole foods diet is so important, because there's no way we could design a fiber supplement or even like a prebiotic supplement of any kind that can create the same type of diversity that a diverse whole foods diet can.
Yeah, I love it. I've been rereading Dr. William Davis's Super Gut book, and I actually just finished I made some of his yogurt. And that's kind of thing I think he talks about is two bacteria. I put casein reuteri and made yogurt with little inulin, and it turned out thick finally. But I think it's the same thing. If you take these probiotics, and they'll help feed and make other ones.
Yes,
and your small
that's what we call keystone species.
Keystone species.
So keystone species are ones, and this is just an ecology term. So like oysters are keystone species, alligators are keystone species, beavers are keystone species, right? So like a keystone species is any species within an ecosystem that modifies the ecosystem in such a way that creates habitat for other members of that ecosystem. So, for example, a lot of bacillus species, which are the soil-based organisms, are keystone species. So they're ones that will modify, and for a lot of bacteria, it's by changing the acidity in the gut, because most of the most beneficial species like a really acidic environment. So short-chain fatty acids, for example, they're acids. They help to lower the pH. That helps to create an inhospitable environment to pathogens and a more hospitable environment to these important probiotic species that are adapted to live in the gut microbiome of humans. So any animal or bacteria or any organism that modifies the environment to make it a habitat for other species is considered keystone. And we've got many different keystone bacteria that live in our guts.
Yeah, it's always fascinates me. I interviewed years ago Karan of Microbiome Labs, and
yes,
I remember the first time I started hearing all those words and bacteria. It's like amazing.
Yeah, we have whenever we've gotten together, we have just talked nerd language for hours. Yes,
I bet. I know. Okay, so let me bring it back to Nutrivore. So as I said, I do lab testing and work on what we eat. And no one wants to really take 20 different supplements because you're low in this. So it's always, why are you low? What are you low? So micronutrient testing, lab testing in general, identifying what you're low in. But it's also looking at what else is going on that's causing you to be low. Look at what you're eating, but how you're eating, how you're digesting your food and absorbing it, breaking it down, absorbing it. So what if you found to work on the Nutrivore to get all these nutrients? How do we know if we need to eat more of something than the other?
So similar to our conversation about like increased needs for athletes, there are certain situations where we know that there's increased need. So like if you're stressed, you have increased need for vitamin C. You're burning through your vitamin C. Or if you're a smoker, you have increased need for vitamin C. Or if you've recently been sick, you've been burning through your vitamin C. You need more vitamin C. But we don't really have those types of like well-defined relationships for a lot of things. So we can sometimes say like, vitamin D is a really good example, right? We know we make it in response to the sun. We need cholesterol in our skin to make it because cholesterol is the backbone of all steroid hormones, of which vitamin D is one. And we know that there's certain genes. We know that certain inflammatory states will inhibit the production of vitamin D. Also, we're not really making active vitamin D in our skin. We're making a vitamin D precursor. So we need our livers to convert that. And then it goes to our kidneys and our kidneys convert that. And then we finally have the active form. So depending on how our livers and kidneys are doing, that will determine our vitamin D levels. Although we're not even measuring the active form. We're measuring the one our livers make, not the ones our kidneys make. Anyways, we could go through that one for hours too. So, from the perspective of like identifying why are we so low in things, sometimes we're just never going to know the answer. So sometimes it's going to be your kidneys are not healthy and they're not regulating something very well. So there's certain nutrients that doing a blood test, for example, like electrolytes, potassium, magnesium, calcium, they're not really measuring how much is in our diets. They're measuring the health of our kidneys, of our parathyroid gland. They're more proxies for organ health than they are for dietary intake. And then there's other nutrients that we can measure in our blood that are directly linked to dietary intake. And so I think working with a practitioner who knows the difference is going to be step one. Step two is going to be do a food journal and see where your intake is at, and identify if you're actually meeting the recommended dietary intake levels of those nutrients. If not, get it up there and see if that fixes the problem. If it doesn't, there could be something else going on, and you might never know. There are certainly lots of genes that impact nutrient metabolism, right? Conversion of carotenoids to vitamin A is linked to genetics, for example. We know, for example, people with MTHFR gene variants can't convert folic acid into methyl tetrafolate very well. So there are some genes that we know can impact these systems. We don't know all of them. Mm-hmm. And so being comfortable with the answer might not exist. I think that a food-based strategy is always first line, but also it's not going to be sufficient for everyone. You might have too big of a deficiency to be able to address with foods alone. Or you might have something else going on. You might have absorption issues if you have celiac disease or Crohn's disease or ulcerative colitis, or you've had bariatric surgery. The human body is fantastically complex. And Nutrivore is a fantastic tool, right? It is a tool for increasing our nutrient intake. It is not going to be enough for everybody. It's not going to be the thing that fixes every person. There are lots of things we can't fix with diet, right? So I think in those situations, finding expertise, finding somebody that expert to add to your healthcare providing team, who can help identify foods that will help fill shortfalls. And then if that fails, right, identifying the needs for supplements, who can test and retest and make sure we're staying in the right range. That is still an expertise that is absolutely necessary in our world.
Yeah, I believe in that as well. I'm in my current program. I'm always in some schooling, but my current program is the Wild Health Precision Medicine course, which is all genetics and combining that with functional lab testing or blood chemistry to start. So it's interesting of all the genetic SNPs you're talking about, that it's just so fascinating to look into that and tie it all together to see the whole picture, to really have precision medicine or personalized coaching programs for people.
And I would suspect that in 10 or 15 years, a lot of the gaps in our current knowledge when it comes to nutrient metabolism's relationship to specific gene mutations, I think we'll have a lot of those gaps filled in. It's a fairly new, like nutrigenomics in general is quite a new field of study, but also like a really exciting one that lots of people are doing research in. So I suspect that type of approach will look very different in a decade.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I know we just got a couple minutes, and this question I have left that it's an hour-long conversation. So just to touch on this, and you can have a 30-second response. So with Nutrivore and just getting rid of, as you're saying, so many different diets and being so restricted, I see a lot of patterns with people that are athletes, endurance athletes. They are switching addictions from being so restrictive. Maybe they have a sugar addiction background or alcohol, drugs, and they switch to endurance exercise, to racing and different events. And going to different diets, I think being so restricted, some people succeed, other people, to me, it's another type of eating disorder, dysmorphia, and things like that. That's just, are we really dealing with those root cause, those inner feelings, that core feelings that are driving this connection or relationship with food? So any comments of kind of people, addictive personalities that are so restrictive and everything, or all in or all out?
I mean, I think the psychology research backs this up, right? So that, so people with eating disorders tend to swap eating disorders rather than recover from eating disorders. So I have a history of binge eating disorder. I used to be morbidly obese. my entry into the health and wellness space involved developing orthorexia. It took me a long time to recognize that that was what was actually happening. I was in a huge amount of denial about that. I was all in on the therapeutic diet. And so, because we don't have time to really dig into this in detail, I think awareness is the first step. So really being able to look at my own personal behaviors and patterns, relationship with food, relationship with my body. For me, there was a lot of compulsion issues that I had with that. So being able to look at that and really think about it honestly, I think that's step one, right? Step one, admit I have a problem. And I think, availing ourselves of expertise, working, for me, it was a lot of therapy, working with an eating disorder specialist. I think it is so fantastically important to get the help we need, because that mental health challenge is always going to be a barrier to adopting healthier habits. And most of those don't go away on their own. So finding that expertise and availing ourselves of it, getting help, I think is really important.
Yeah. So big topics. I know before pre-COVID, we used to have Nutritional Therapy Association conferences and FDN practitioner workshops, conferences, and we would have topics as this. And I hope someday they'll all come back, because no one ever really is addressing those big issues to other practitioners. But I think it is, really the psychology of all of it. And we talked a lot about trauma in the past and how that's connected to the kind of what drives us. And I always find it fascinating to put that together, especially doing behavior coaching with clients and figuring out their why and what drives them. And you realize there's a lot more going on back there of, okay, why am I doing this? Why am I so into these different diets or exercise programs and health optimizer? But maybe there's something else there that we need to address before we can step forward into this other area. So your book comes out in April, May
14th.
That's exciting.
Hopefully people are listening to this on May 14th and they're going to run out to the store and get it.
I know there's Barnes and Nobles out there, but Amazon, of course. Where do you have bookshops? You're going to be able to get it
everywhere books are sold. And if they're not at your local independent bookstore, go and ask for it. They'll be able to order it. And maybe they'll order 3 or 4 copies. So it's not just one for you, but it's a few more to stock on their shelves so someone else can see it.
I think that's a great idea for gifts, because I did that with Dr. Gabrielle Lyon's book, Forever Strong. And I think this is another good book to give people for birthday gifts and just self-care. Because what are you going to give them? But give them a book that actually shows you they care about their health and their longevity, and taking care of themselves is a good gift.
Now, and it's a book that everyone will get something out of. So wherever you are on your health journey, there's something in this book for you.
Yeah. And I'll just say the description I have written down is ditch diet culture and get the most nutrients from your food with the no guilt, personalized and exciting new science that will change how you think about food and nourishment. From the New York Times bestselling author, Dr. Sarah Ballantyne. So right there, I think that's a description that hits home for everyone, that they should have curiosity, which is why I wanted you on the show, because I think it's going to be a huge success and a good eye-opener for a lot of people that are so fixated on different diet camps, and bring it back to nutrient density. You are what you eat, and getting foods that you can fuel your body and your mind with is essential to our just feeling good every day, thriving as we age. So thank you.
Thank you.
Hey guys, it's Debbie. And if you like what you listen to, and you're curious and want to learn more on how you can be a health optimizer and take ownership of your health in the future when you are 70, 80, 90 years old, let's talk. Head to debbiepotts.net and set up a free discovery call with me to learn more about my personalized coaching packages as my health investigation package or my VIP package, where we dive into a program together for 6 months to help learn what you can do to be the best version of yourself.
Thanks for listening to the Low Carb Athlete Podcast. If you have any questions, feedback, or topic suggestions, let us know on Facebook or at debbiepotts.net. You can help us continue and grow by leaving a review on iTunes. Thanks again, and see you next time.